There we go.
So as like a disclaimer, Pages is not in the core release management use case or realm. They meet different needs and expectations from like the market and from a persona. Release management is very focused on coordinating deployments and orchestrating deployments at the enterprise, but also enabling a developer to be empowered to release continuously and take advantage of the full GitLab offering in CI/CD. So Pages was put inside of release management as a convenience for the ops section. And I've been helping support it from an API technical perspective and making sure that it's meeting the expectations of the existing user base, since it's a production product that people absolutely love, and incrementally improving the technical debt that lives on it today. It's not like something that I spend a bunch of time investing in direction or vision. I have some popular issues and items that I'm prioritizing after we finish the technical re-architecture piece. But I continually tell my team, since it's a non-revenue generating product, we aren't really competing from a market share perspective with Netlify. We are a user share competitor with Netlify, but that means that we could be eroding their revenue if we build out more capabilities in both the CDN and Static Site Editor capabilities. That's not, this will be a decision that the Noob will need to make, that if we want to be a Netlify competitor, then we should invest further in Pages efforts to meet that expectation from a static site engine, which also would intersect with your direction. But today, my vision for Pages is stops at the popular, most upvoted issues.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense.
You can, yeah, ask any questions or start your.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Where I'm coming from here is the Static Site Editor as a group, as we've discussed before when I was running through my understanding when we chatted several months ago, is initially focused on just providing a really, really intuitive editing experience for markdown files that eventually get hosted on static sites. We aren't necessarily considering tying the functionality, or we hadn't necessarily been considering tying the functionality to Pages itself, like making it exclusively available to people who host on Pages or anything like that. But given that Pages is where you host static sites inside GitLab, it's come up many times, like how can we find a home for the static site editor, and is Pages the right home for that type of functionality? And so recently, I'd say in the past month or so, I've been thinking more about the longer term direction, because we're starting to get some nice iterations, and we're shipping in the product now, and we're kind of approaching where the handbook use case is getting, the end of the tunnel is in sight. So we had previously investigated a lot of opportunities where or options for direction that included like a live page editing experience, maybe like a runtime JavaScript like package that runs on your production site and lets you edit in line and then feeds through an API back to the data source. It's still a direction we might head, but it's a little bit limiting because you need a certain you need a pretty high bar for your tech stack on your static site generator. It only works with ones that run on JavaScript, so middleman's out. The environment that we would need to create for somebody to get quick previews, like almost immediate previews of their changes, is just really difficult to imagine being universal. So we would have to probably pick like 2 or 3 static site generators that we bless with our plugin, and we would generate plugins for those that run in the production environment. It's not off the table, but it's not necessarily the experience that keeps people in GitLab, or allows us to share like among the other features. So it doesn't get us any closer to driving up, you know, people crossing over to a different stage, or even within the same stage, like going over to the web IDE. But if we were to consider Pages as the home for Static Site Editor, it is fairly straightforward to think of a future where we have some translation layer between the static site generator and the project, and a Pages interface that presents a list of all your pages, maybe a nested, you know, directory tree like the web IDE does, but in a more visual way. Lets you open those up in the static site editor to initialize it. So that would be the home for the editor itself. And then we can take it from there, where we start to investigate features that you would normally see in a headless CMS, like asset management, or, you know, like shared files between pages and things like that. It's a can of worms, though. I mean, as you know, Netlify is the leader in that market. Contentful just actually yesterday announced they raised another 80 million in Series E. Like, there are established competitors and they have a major head start, which isn't to say we shouldn't also investigate it, but what I'm thinking about right now is really, if we were to go in the direction of providing a CMS-like experience for static sites inside GitLab, what does that really look like, and how close can we get to a headless CMS without actually having a headless CMS, if that makes any sense? Because one of the things we've been talking about recently, especially we just had a conversation about this with the marketing team, who's investigating whether they should migrate content over to a CMS for ease of collaboration and maintenance and stuff like that. Most of the CMSs, the headless CMSs, they require a database. So the content is brought into the database where it can be mutated and managed and then served back out as static pages. So you could be hosted on something like Pages or Netlify or wherever. Our approach, and maybe this is the wrong approach, but right now our approach is still, we want to read directly from the project in Markdown. We don't want to take the data away from the project and put it in a database to be accessed by a headless CMS. We would prefer some level of, I guess, translation to occur on the fly, where the project data can live in the same directory as Markdown files, and in your Jekyll or Hugo site remains untouched. Then when the static site editor pulls the data in, that's when we do the conversion for editing, and then we spit it back out as Markdown. I think that workflow makes a lot more sense for GitLab, assuming it's inside the GitLab product, because then you can have people editing the same content from multiple parts of the product, like the web IDE or a local dev environment. You can be editing from a merge request, and then we maintain the single source of truth that's not tied up in a, you know, SQLite database or something like that. All that said, it's very future thinking. Like we have a ways to go before we could really implement any of this. Right now, we're very focused on refining the editor and then building out workflows for like managing edits to multiple pages, or picking up draft edits and like making multiple commits to the same MR from behind the scenes within the editor. I'd say probably within like a quarter or so, maybe, 4 months, we might be more realistically looking at creating new pages from templates and navigating between pages and things like that. That would require a little more UI within the GitLab product if that ends up being our home. But that naturally does raise questions about, are you competing with Netlify? How does this interface with existing headless CMSs, if it does at all? do we give people options to use those as data sources or a GitLab project? And then do we make the editor available to people who aren't hosting on pages? There's a bunch of questions there that we would need to answer. And
so I would say from a GitLab pages angle, we support any sort of static site generator. So my inclination would be your SSE should hook up to any of that. Because we've already set the precedent that we want to integrate with any SSG.
Yeah.
So in my head, it's like, yeah, we should be able to hook up and play. I think part of this that's so abstracted for me is that I don't really know how Static Site Editor is introduced into the general flow of a developer persona or other personas that we're meeting in GitLab. Or is this trying to open up greenfield?
That's what it is. It's specifically to address personas that are underserved within the GitLab product already. So content writers, authors, copywriters, product managers, executives, people who aren't comfortable interfacing directly with the Markdown or navigating the project hierarchy through the web IDE. People who would like a little more, GUI around their content. And the editor in that way, the single page editor we have now, the WYSIWYG mode is the default and primary editing experience, although it lets you switch back to the raw Markdown if you need to. That's our way of saying, this is right now a really hopefully solid visual Markdown editor. And to that end, our home might not be pages. It might just be a different mode of web IDE where you toggle over if the file format supports it or if it's been configured properly or something like that.
How do you expect this to intersect with like visual review or review apps? Or
we've thought about that a little bit. If we go in the direction of having this be something that gets like embedded on a page and lets you edit live on the page in an environment similar to like you would edit a Squarespace site or something like that, or Webflow, you could potentially embed that in a review app as well, and then somehow, waving my hands, pipe those changes back out to the MR from the review app or something like that. As of now, I think what we would do is we would probably do on-the-fly builds for live preview that don't include the whole pipeline, and then we would just let review apps continue to work. I don't think the actual like live preview feature would work for us. I believe it needs to be like HTML essentially. I don't think that because it requires it to get sent through the static site generator, you need to at least build that one page to get the output. I'm not sure the live preview feature like that we have in the web IDE is going to work for us, but it's an option.
Okay. I'm going to send you this MVC issue here. I don't have access to the agenda, so otherwise I would drop it in there.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So there's this visual review functionality that creates that conduit that you can add a comment in this visual review application, and then it pumps it back to the merge request for feedback. There might be something to like learn and abstract there on how Static Site Editor can interplay with pages and bring it back to the merge request. Because I think that say that a content editor is working with a developer on an e-commerce website, and they are reviewing the pages for a new transaction button, and they have to test a couple scenarios for error messages to pop up. Let's say that while they're wanting to edit in that page, they can edit, hey, here's what the copy should say. It could use the visual review technology to take that edit and copy it back as a comment to the merge request, by which the developer could apply the suggestion and then run the pipeline. So we're like bringing together these two personas with the visual review technology.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the use case we're hopefully going to get to is a contributor of some kind visits the actual production page and sees a typo or wants to change the marketing copy, and wants to basically initiate that MR themselves. And so you click edit, and instead of going to the web IDE or having to learn Markdown or run a local environment, you are presented with the tools you need to just change the copy and submit an MR. I could see that working the other way in visual review as well. I know that there was, I've been chatting with Kristen about design feedback in the visual review in review apps. I know she's investigated this as well too, so definitely look into that. I will read that issue for sure. In about 10 minutes, I invited Farnoosh to chat about the release post stuff because she is really anxious to get us both on a call. So I'll try and wrap up maybe some next steps or things to keep in mind. But I think if we validate that Pages is a good place and that users would benefit from, or the company would benefit from, having some lightweight content management within within the GitLab product. I won't use the word CMS, but if that is beneficial, I could definitely see us sort of co-opting or even owning the Pages concept. We don't, practically speaking, have engineers with spare cycles to like take over maintenance of it right now, because we're already spread across 3 groups and only have 5 engineers. So we'd have to talk about resources. Well, we have
categories.
3 categories. So we have
that's fine.
docs, the doc site, the handbook, and Static Site Editor. But yeah, we could if the company is going to go in this direction, we can talk about whether.
Well, so I think from a to-dos perspective, we should create an issue for Pages CMS Lite, which is about intersecting the Static Site Editor for Pages. And I'm suffixing it with Lite so that we're setting the expectation that this isn't a head-to-head, this is an iteration to help erode some of the Netlify users, but potentially strengthen our position for non-developers using Pages. So like that would be my perception as the Pages owner on how to play with that. And then I think the other action item you and I should consider partnering on is business case of how much of the market is actually serviceable by Pages and Static Site Editor today. So if we create a unified experience here, how much of the Netlify market would we actually capture? So some opportunity here would be looking at our current customers where we have Netlify users. We could potentially look at the customers who are using a Netlify Pages template or have a fork of it and use that as a proxy for the population that's using GitLab and Pages and GitLab and Netlify. And we could attach some further segmentation on that to suggest that this is an opportunity worth pursuing, and we'd want to justify additional headcount, because if I do transfer Pages to you, I would risk the 3 engineers that currently have the domain expertise and knowledge. And either that's they transfer to you as a Pages owner, or they get backfilled with new engineers, or we keep the people who are responsible for like secrets management and release evidence, and you get the one that's primarily focused on the Go side of Pages. And they, of course, would stay maintainers, so they would be reviewing the MRs of your team in Pages, speaking in like future context there. But first priority would be establish our SAM, and if it's worth the additional investment.
I was actually just about to ask if you had any existing documents or research about Netlify's market or anything, like a competitive analysis. If not, I can start kicking that off.
I do not, because Pages, again, was like a tangential experience to my primary persona. So I think we could look at the Netlify template forks, and I can see about getting some data on usage and how many of those are like actively being used. What is your market right now? Like how big is your market right now? How many millions are you going after?
We're not really, we're addressing entirely the needs of the internal users right now. We don't have a defined market for external users yet. It's just so unknown. So we have about 24 monthly active users outside of GitLab. It's almost nothing. We haven't done any marketing of it per se, and people discover it through our project template, but it's not something that it's not mature enough yet that we've really figured out what market to even measure.
How many copywriters, tech writers are on teams of customers today? Because that would be a way to extrapolate the demand and the white space that we have with this product.
Right. So, I don't have an answer. It's
okay. I don't mean to be a jerk about it. That's not my intent. I was just like, because your market's there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have, put 5 people on it, right?
Yeah.
There's an opportunity there.
There's definitely an opportunity. We haven't measured the opportunity or quantified that opportunity yet because we've been focused entirely on addressing our GitLab team with the handbook, and figuring out how we can make it generalized enough that it's available in the product, but without knowing yet, how exactly it's going to fit into the product. We don't have data on that. So I think that would be part of this exercise as well, is quantifying.
If you want
existing
help
users
with any of this, just let me know.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
This is my favorite part of being a product manager, is doing the business case analysis. So
great.
Not saying that you don't love doing it, but if you may love doing it, but if you haven't already done it and you need help or you want support, I'm here. I'm not trying to be like condescending.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Not at all. Not at all.
Awesome. So Farnoosh, do you want to bring her in, or?
I gave her a heads up at the top of the hour. So we have a couple minutes and she'll just join the same meeting. Hopefully she's got the link.
So I see 3 issues here then. We can create an issue on the Pages CMS Lite, which you and I can start putting some, wireframes, visions around, so then we can maybe throw that out to customers for some feedback to see if that's worth like an idea worth pursuing. Because what I'd want to do is find an opportunity to get developers to use it, which is our core offering, and then have that momentum, like push other personas to want to use it. And then the second one is our business case issue. And then the third one is defining the market for SSE.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's a few other headless CMSs as well. I'm going to do some competitive analysis in general and try and figure out what their market is like, how many users, how much revenue they're bringing in.
We know that Netlify's market's really huge, but I just don't know how much of that we could actually service with the limitations that we have without a CDN. I don't know how much of their experience is driven by that.
Yeah, I don't either. I'd love to chat with more Netlify users and see how much of that product they're actually using. Is it out of convenience and they don't use any of the additional features?
Yeah.
Do they really see a benefit in the speed that is offered because of the CDN product or something like that?
Got it.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
How are you? Everyone good?
Yeah, we're good. We're just perfect timing. We're just wrapping up.
No worries. Take your time.
No.
Well, thank you for setting up this quick touch base. I realize we might need more time, but I at least wanted to kind of get on the same page because I've been out for a week and I'm sure things have happened, comments have happened at issue. Um, and I actually had a kind of a long follow-up chat just based on some comments in that research issue with James, and he had some interesting thoughts and suggestions, so that was good. Um, so here's where my head is at, y'all. I think in some ways, when I think about what we're trying to do, with having product release notes and decoupling ourselves from the marketing blog post, my concerns are less about can we put content at issues, because it looks like we can, and it would have a lot of benefits. My concern is more around how do we do that